thanks so much for joining. My name is Mindy Johnson and welcome to Primary Sources. And I'm very excited for our gathering today. And when we look, we're going to be talking with two of, I think, our most remarkable artists out there. And when we look at the work of these two artists and the specific realm that they work within, let's give this a different approach to how we begin with these artists and their work as editorial cartoonists. It starts with a line, a basic, simple line. And more lines then lead to ideas and volume and direction to move in. And soon that volume and direction and gathering of lines leads to a form, something that really provides an opportunity to express. And when, as artists, we put thought into words or into form, to express, to show, to manifest, or reveal, as artists, that really is through the idea. And with our artists today, artists with pens, an idea forms, something grows, takes root. And when put together in combination with styles and other forms, it's expressed, it grows, it expands, and transforms into an even more vibrant, expressive style. And we find this taking shape in a voice, a distinctive utterance. The verb pronunciation of voice really applies here, to give utterance or expression, to declare or to proclaim. When we think of giving voice to something, having a voice really means to amplify, or volume, giving volume to what's being expressed. Speakers use microphones. The power of the printed word provides a form for expression and even an opportunity for commentary. Commentary typically is something applied serving to illustrate a point, prompt a realization, or exemplify, especially in the case of something unfortunate, more often than not in the case of something unfortunate. But the beauty of the artists we're going to be talking to today also involves the fortunate as well. Historically, commentary has always been a part of our world through the pen, which is often mightier than the sword, as they say. Artists with rapier wit and distinctive style often are armed with the truth, and each is given a powerful platform to express their voice and make a statement through their artistry. And it gives us as the readers the opportunity to pause, to think, perhaps to change, perhaps to grow. Today's primary sources guests have really developed a mastery within their artistry and beyond. Just a couple of examples of the statements and impressions that emanate from their pens. They have illustrated and animated and moved from illustration to character design. These artists are two of the leading voices within the art of illustrative commentary, working with some of the top leaders and having their work appear within some of the top forums for this art form. They are both authors and illustrators for a wide range of books of their work and the work of others. And both are multi-award-winning artists, Rueben Awards, as well as TALNEAS as a Pulitzer Prize winner for her editorial cartoons. And it is my great pleasure to welcome today with us NICK GALIFINAKIS and TALNEAS, two of our leading voices with pens. Thanks so much for joining, you guys. It's great fun to have you here. What a treat. Now that we are all gathered into our safe place, let's start with sort of an intro. And I know you've prepared, as an editorial cartoonist, you've prepared, you often get asked the question, what is an editorial cartoonist? So you've come armed and ready with an example directly from your pen. So let's jump in.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's actually a piece that I created for the Bertelsmann Foundation that was reprinted in the Washington Post. And the Bertelsmann Foundation holds a a yearly conference, and they have special themes, and that theme for the year was democracy. And it was the first time they had invited a cartoonist to participate. Usually it's just writers, ex-diplomats, and, of course, it's all about words. So I thought, just to make sure they understood, what it was we did, I created kind of a graphic essay. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's a scrolling piece. So we'll be going up to down. And the first frame is, okay, people don't usually associate editorial cartoonists as an essential element of a democracy. They think of cartoonists as the people who draw the funny pages or stand-up comedians. But editorial cartoonists are more than just funny guys. They are a vital part of any democracy. While humor is an important part of what we do, our primary purpose is to express a point of view. Our aim is pointed toward those who abuse their power. And through satire and ridicule, editorial cartoonists expose corruption and wrongdoing by our representatives and institutions. But cartoonists face dangers throughout the world. We are threatened, sometimes jailed, beaten, and even killed. So why are cartoons so powerful? Because they are visual. You don't have to read to understand them. Cartoons transcend language and borders. Everyone, from the richest to poorest and regardless of class, can relate to and be affected by an editorial cartoon. While cartoonists in the United States don't have to fear being arrested or jailed for what we draw, like some of our colleagues do around the world, we do face threats. There are social media mobs, politically motivated terminations, and of course, the occasional ex-president who seems to think that he can sue everyone. So if you see a country without editorial cartoonists, or one where they are not creating tough, pointed satire against politicians and policies, be aware. A silenced cartoonist is an indicator of an unhealthy environment for freedom of expression. Editorial cartoonists are democracy's canary in a coal mine. And that's it.
Whew, hardly it. My goodness, it's a powerful beginning, and I think a real strong statement to the importance of the work that you do. Each of you has cultivated just whip smart, bleeding edge visual commentary in your area of work. Kind of, it's essential imagery, distilled imagery and truth. And so I guess my question for you, Nick, is not so much how you got your start, but why this is the field for you, why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And visual examples you have are always welcome.
Well, thank you. My visual examples will follow. I'll answer your question, and then they'll follow in a bit, because I am typical of a cartoonist, and Anne just illustrated beautifully on a couple of levels why she's such an outlier, because Anne is that rare breed of cartooning animal. She's organized. Whereas,
it's funny too.
In fact, that's a good place to start, but I won't answer your question, Mindy. But many years ago, Anne and I were having dinner, and she was talking about a concept she was coming up with, maybe showing me something, and I was looking at it, and she was asking my opinion, and I said, "Oh, you know what might make this funnier?" And she just looked at me. She goes, and very straight and sober, she looked at me. She goes, "Nick, I'm not trying to be funny." And I was like, you know, that's right. Anne is more of a puncher. You know, you know precisely where she stands. She got there a different way. I approach it through humor. And I used to do political cartoons. I actually did them for the USA Today, and then for publications. I left USA Today and sort of publications as I could, different magazines and other newspapers. And what happened at that around that time was that I discovered that I didn't only have that fire in the belly to comment politically, but also to, this probably says a lot of terrible things about me when I think, but also to comment personally. Yes, I was outraged about whatever one should be outraged about in the news and in world events, and certainly when you're talking about how other human beings are second-class citizens and the plight of the disadvantaged. But these sensibilities started focusing more and more on the people around me, regardless of socioeconomic status. I'd noticed that a man was speaking to a woman in a particular way, it made me guess at what their relationship was like behind the scenes. That seems controlling to me. That might be abusive behind the scenes. Someone who uses I and me a lot. Is sort of wearing their insecurity on their sleeve. These kinds of things, which I maybe not so much consciously noticed when I was younger, I noticed quite a lot as the more the older I got, and the more I developed a comfort with a graphic vocabulary, and so commenting on those things in that arena, that very intimate area of our lives and our dynamic became paramount to me. And wonderfully, my then wife at the time, Carolyn Hacks, who is still the country's preeminent advice columnist, she was starting out. We started out together. And I was freelancing here and there, and Carolyn's editor, Peggy Hackman, suggested, she goes, maybe Nick could contribute an icon to go with this column that you're writing on the human dynamic. And I simply, the first time I delivered a full-fledged standalone cartoon about that issue connected to the column, but as I said, standing alone. And that felt like home. And so that is the why. And the why, Mindy, keeps growing because, as you know, as we all do, if anybody develops any sort of self-awareness, you start to, you really can't, I think, in a compelling and accurate way, comment on another person unless you have yourself, unless you've dissected yourself, you're analyzing. I mean, that's a total work in progress, because self-awareness, which is one of my big bugaboos, which I think I'm sure I have a couple of cartoons to show you guys, is essential to why I got into what I do. It's not just to comment on you, but sort of to comment on me.
Interesting. Do you, for both of you, do you feel that observation, I mean, of the essential tools you need as an artist in the unique forum that you're both in, I know, Nick, you've talked quite a bit about truth and the importance of truth. Is observation, where are your observational skills? You mentioned about, and I know you're constantly tapped into the news, observing what's going on in the world, and then finding a way to make a statement about it. Nick, you mentioned you happen to overhear a conversation and yet there's a larger statement to be made about that. Talk a little bit about how observation plays a role in your work.
Well, it's interesting listening to Nick, talking about observing people, because even though our work is different, I mean, I'm basically into the politics and he's more into the personal, social level of it. It's still the same thing that I do. I observe. I mean, this is the way that I approach caricatures. I don't believe that caricatures, I've said this many times before when talking about caricatures, that I don't really look to create a drawing that looks like that person. I'm trying to find out who that person is. And the way you do that, or at least the way I do it, is, I try to listen to them, first of all, give speeches, answer questions. I watch them on video. And once I feel like I understand that person, those are my most successful caricatures. I mean, the two that come to mind are, I did a Dick Cheney that I don't think looks like him. I think many of my colleagues did much better Dick Cheneys, but my Dick Cheney was the way I felt about him after listening to him give a speech about, I think it was about the environment, where he basically just pushed aside the argument that, saving the environment is a good thing. And he's like, and I thought, well, now I know this guy. So, and then also with Trump is another, my Trump has, I don't know if devolve into, basically as someone has told me, readers have said, he looks like a big orange carp now. Well, it's his personality. It's what he is. So I think we kind of approach it the same way. We just do different, we just direct our drawings to different topics,
I couldn't agree more. With Anne's work, she's looking at a politician and she has a bunch of information. Well, first of all, she has their political track record, whatever it might be. And then she's listening to them say this, and then she's watching them do that. And she has to reconcile those things. And of course, very often you can't reconcile those things. And that's where she'll enter the equation and point that out. And hopefully, you're pulling back the covers and saying, see, this is what's actually happening. So she has that information to work with. And I do the same thing in that, let me take it from this, when you're dating someone, when you date someone, you learn things, and things are unfolding naturally, hopefully healthfully. And then, as you get to know each other and you become familiar with each other, things have to sort of align. And if they don't, there's an issue. I always ask myself this question when I used to date, and I had felt like I had enough information on somebody. I'd be like, what will they do if I break up with them? How will they respond? Will they be relieved? Will they be very sad but eventually accept it? Will they be angry and try to punish me? They become punitive and just napalm the play. The answer to that question, and I'm still dating the person, we're fine. The answer to that question will tell you if you should see them even one more time or many more times. And so it's that area, I'm trying to reconcile these things, that then I try to find a way to comment on graphically. It's the same tools.
Yeah, let's take a look at a few examples. Because I think the visuals speak volumes in each of your areas. I mean, how you encapsulate the posture, the position, the line, the form, is all part of what is encapsulating the concept of what you're getting across. So let's talk a little bit about how you approach that.
Well, that's funny that you frame it that way, because I very much believe I am one of the artists who thinks that, you know, everything, body attitude, expression, all of that is there to serve your point, whatever point you're trying to make. Even the people in the background, in this particular cartoon here, two friends, which is so typical, by the way, of my work on another level. More than one person has said, Nick, your cartoons should really be called Two Women Talking. Because it's just a gigantic percentage of them that are two women talking. It's a comfort zone, and I feel
Statement in and of itself.
men relate to it, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with that. So yeah, even the people in the background, they're not in the way of what I'm trying to say here. You know, the line being, I'm not sure even your powers of self-deception will be enough here, because, you know, we all know these people, and often we are these people who delude ourselves about whatever it is we're deluding ourselves, you know, and the way that I framed this allows you to bring what they're talking about into it. I don't have to supply you with that. You know, it could be a new boyfriend, it can be an old boyfriend, it could be your husband, it could be a job, it could be the plastic surgery you're considering, whatever. Hopefully the truth here, what resonates is that, boy, we walk through life telling ourselves lie after convenient lie after convenient lie, and then we try to fold our friends into it to reinforce this stuff. And that's a whole other category of commentary. In my career, is like the friend who just won't go along anymore. And this is that friend. Just can't, just won't stay on what I call the hamster wheel of hell, answering the same question, listening to the same complaint. It's the identical problem. You're just 5 boyfriends in now, but it's really the same thing. It's just, you know, this dynamic, which is as old as human beings are. It's part of what fascinated me about doing this kind of thing, Mindy, is that I like the idea that I'm commenting on issues that have been with us since we've congregated in caves and been social creatures. Jealousy, insecurity, you know, these kinds of things.
That brings up there's a dance, it seems, that you guys both do between the timely and the timeless, right? And I think your work is very timely, but there's a timelessness in it. The statement you're making about what's happening and in the news, current events, environmental issues, social issues, things like that. Nick, there seems to be a timelessness seems to come into play more so. Any examples or thoughts on how you, does that even become part of your work? Are you thinking in terms of that? Are you, it just unfolds that way?
Oh my goodness. I'll say this and then let Anne speak. I think about it with almost every cartoon, but I can speak to that in a moment. Anne, go ahead.
Well, of course, I'm dealing with a different timeline than Nick is. I mean, you know, like you said, the stuff he's addressing goes way back. I'm dealing with the political situation now. The one thing I can say in relation to that, though, you know, I've been doing this now for, oh my gosh, almost 30 years. And the last 4 years the news cycle has completely changed. I mean, from when Nick was doing it, you know, when he was working for USA Today, I mean, it's a completely different animal now about how you work. And I had to incorporate that into how I approached it. I had to weed out things. I think, Mindy, you and I talked about this the last time we were at CalArts. You know, there was so much going on. The news would change not only weekly, but daily, but hourly. And I'd have to decide what I wanted to address, what was the most important. And in terms of how it affects your art, I didn't really realize this until I had a conversation with another cartoonist about it. But as you showed in the beginning, a couple examples of our work, you know, my work was a very distinct style. It was clean ink lines and clean colors. And I found myself changing that once I got into the last 4 years with a different administration and just a different topics and different news cycle. I went back to pencil and watercolors because and it was more scribbly, as you'll see when we look through some other stuff. And my friend asked me, well, why did you do that? And I go, well, I didn't really consciously do that. I just felt like it needed it. You know, it needs it now. And I'm going to be curious to see, now that we don't have that administration, I don't have the same president that I criticize so heavily, what's going to change now? Because we're still early, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something that I think about
Interesting.
longer term now when I look back at it, you know, and when you're in the middle of it, I mean, honestly, all I did was just hang on these last 4 years. I was just trying to get through everything.
I can only imagine it, but I think that's what lends itself to just the eloquence of both of your work. You've got to be so efficient with the space and the type of the medium you're working in, the tools you're choosing. All of that is determinant of what the ultimate comment is. And it's interesting that you did shift. Nick, have you ever had any examples where you briefly mentioned in the other piece, the other image you had up, that within the framework, that single frame, you were making choices about the background and other things to lead?
Sure.
Let's take a look at some more work. And
Yeah, I will say, Matt, if you could open opening and pull up number 1.
our amazing Matt.
And while you're doing that, I will give us a little bit more light. Just there we go. So yeah, societal pressure and individual pressure, and how society is made up of a bunch of individuals. People have told, in this particular case, you know, you have a hard time if you happen to be a heavy person in this society, certainly in our country, with the ideal who we are projected on every single commercial, and it's terribleness. And then of course you have your close ones, if you're allowed to be close, to cross and push. They don't respect boundaries at all. And there's an intersection between those two things, and that's what I'm illustrating here. It's your choice: eternity on a diet, which is terrible, or being told you need to be on a diet, which is terrible. And so so Mindy, I always want something to read very quickly and cleanly. I had an experience many years ago. I was riding the Amtrak, going from Washington to New York or something like that, and a couple of passengers in front of me were reading the paper, and I had just started out, just a couple of years or so, and they were reading the paper, and they turned to the section where my cartoon was very prominently displayed, and they both exclaimed, "Oh, what a nice drawing! What a nice drawing!" Then the other one chimed in, "Oh, that's nice. Look at that. Look at the nice drawing." And my heart sank. It sank because I had realized it was not a total aha, because I sort of suspected this was happening, but that my drawing was so big, so full, so overdone, so detailed, that it completely crushed what I was trying to say. And these two passengers were talking about a drawing instead of talking about a cartoon. And you know what the comment was in forwarding that conversation. And so so when you talk about, you know, some of the elements of form of this, and I now try to keep that in mind. Like, am I killing my joke by rendering, over rendering, super rendering? There are some brilliant drafts when I say draftsmen, I'm also referring to women as well, out there who spend, 98% of their effort on commentary on that, and they completely, in my opinion, they're out of balance. Charles Schultz once privately said, and please don't ask who he said this about. He said it about several who's, and I will not confess, but very good artists, very good, generally cartoonists, and he would go through, and it was a thing. He would say, "See, their line and their humor don't match."
Mm.
And I thought about that, and I think about that, and it's led me on this journey, because I don't think I've hit that spot quite yet, and it's led me on this journey to find it. And maybe later, if we talk about process at all, I'll show you just a couple of examples of that particular odyssey, because I think it's important with commentary. If I'm doing an illustration for the sake of an illustration, it needs to stand alone as a visual. It's beautiful and rendered as best that I can do it, at least. That's one thing. But if it's married to a concept that needs to read immediately, I can't put the weight of an overdone drawing on top of it. You just won't get it. And the drawing might be good. It might be terrific. Finding that balance, and there's so few cartoonists truly find that balance. And some of them are not great draftsmen. One that comes to mind is Gary Larson, The Far Side. His hilarious, bizarre, awkward line marries beautifully with his hilarious, awkward humor. So it's about balance. It's not about, being able to draw like Michelangelo.
And do you find that as well? Do you find challenges in when is it done? Is it overdone? Do I need to pull back? Do I need more?
Well, I mean, I've always had a pretty simple style. I think that comes probably from my animation background in Cal Arts. I mean, I had a couple of exceptional design teachers, Bill Moore and Bob Winquist, and we learned how to do design through him. So yeah, I actually, it's funny, when I first started, I would say that the majority of cartoonists were doing very involved cross-hatching drawings, some of them beautiful, but that it wasn't something I could do. That wasn't how I approached it. So I think my style at the time was probably a little bit jarring. Now, of course, we have a lot different because we have younger members that do completely different styles. But yeah, no, I don't know if it's that I don't have the patience to do backgrounds. I admire them when they're beautiful, but I don't think it's like Nick was saying. You want the reader to see what your point is. You want the eye to go directly to it and understand immediately. You don't want them wandering around looking at, oh, wow, look at that. I mean, if there's a reason for a very intricate background, for the gag or the joke, sure. I was just actually thinking about one that I saw, Mort Gerbert, who just celebrated his 90th birthday, and he's still going strong with the New Yorker. He did this one, I think it was his first printed one, actually, where a couple of women are in a cathedral, and they're looking up at the ceiling, and they're commenting about something at home, but there was a reason for drawing that intricate ceiling, something that had to do with the gag. And, I think that you have to, like Nick was saying, kind of have to weigh with how you want the eye to travel, and if it's getting hung up in a lovely little detail over there, then you probably have a problem.
Right. Just go ahead, Nick.
I was gonna say, sometimes, and Anne touched on that. Sometimes it is perfectly appropriate. She made me think just now, about Mort Gerbert, but my all-time favorite New Yorker cartoonist is Robert Weber, who died, I guess, maybe 3 years ago. The more I study this guy's work, the more I realize that he was one of the quiet geniuses. And one of my favorite cartoons of his, and he had this beautiful, nothing extra in his cartoons. In fact, Mort Gerbert said about Robert Weber, he said, most cartoonists want to be fine artists. Robert Weber was a fine artist who wanted to be a cartoonist. And his compositions are just beautiful. And so he did this one drawing of heaven. It was a heaven of a group shot, of a family picture, if you will, of heaven. And everybody who's ever gone to heaven is drawn into this picture. The thousands and thousands of heads. And they're sort of beautifully composed and cascading down this cloud mountainside. And then in the front is the photographer. So it's got this big thing and the photographer's leaning back. And it says, I need you to, something like, I'm paraphrasing here, it was, I need you to step to the side. I can't see Pliny the Elder. And it's brilliant and hilarious. And it doesn't work if it's just 5 people.
Yeah.
It doesn't work with 10 people. You know, it's got to be the illusion of millions of people, which he drew in there. It's ridiculous. I cut you off, Mindy. You were going to say something.
I was going to say, it strikes me that the work you do is really this ongoing balance between sophisticated simplicity. Yeah. In that it kind of working to get to the essence of the point, the comment, but yet providing enough information there to direct you to it, to clearly convey what it is you're trying to do. How has your, first of all, for each of you, describe your style, your own distinct personal style or influences, and then how it's evolved. What a rack your brain.
Oh my God. You mean I have to actually think back? Okay.
Yes.
Well, you know, it's funny talking about crosshatching. Okay, so I started out as an animator, just to go really far back. I went to California Institute of the Arts. I did work for a few years in the field. I changed over to Walt Disney Imagineering, where I was a show designer. So I was doing conceptual art, you know, obviously in a Disney style, right? And then I decided that I wanted to become an editorial cartoonist. And I started out doing an editorial cartoon that I thought the way all editorial cartoons should be, which is the cross-hatching Mcnelly look, you know, the wonderful draftsman, Jeff Mcnelly. But the problem was editorial cartooning is, you know, you got to be fast. You have to get those things out. You know, if you dawdle too much over a cartoon, just because you want it to look good, you know, the news has already passed you by. And I realized I could not draw like that very fast.
I think we might have a little dropout delay there.
Yeah, it's a little.
It was the start of a great thought. There we are. There you are.
Am I back?
You are back. You
Okay.
realized you couldn't, speaking about the Mcnally style, but then you realized quickly in the instance of time, you couldn't work that heavily.
Right. So I decided to use a brush and ink because I was familiar with it. I had done licensing art for Warner Brothers, which, you know, you have to learn how to use that brush and do a very clean line. So that's how my style came into being. It was sort of a necessity because I had to do these fast. So, and plus, like we've talked about before, the background of learning, you know, design and color, you know, I wanted to also be very simple. So that's how the style came about. And then as we discussed previously, once we got into the Trump administration, I changed again my style, but I didn't consciously do it. You know what I mean? This is something that I like to tell students. I think too many students worry about developing their style. You know, they are very worried. They want to look. It's gonna completely come when you're ready. It has everything to do with what you've learned. You know, I had the skill with the brush and ink that figured into my style, but I didn't consciously choose it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I really encourage them to learn fundamentals of drawing first and not worry so much, and the style will come.
outcomes. You also have a unique, you were one of the first to really push boundaries with Gifs and to take your come full circle with your animation and bring in movement and motion to push the point even further with your commentary. And you're still doing quite a bit with that, yeah?
Yeah, I still do that for the Post. They started in 2008 is when I started with the Post, and I was only doing animation. In fact, if we can put up a couple of simple gifts I've done, if you want to do that while I'm talking. So I had been in animation. I mean, I'm sorry, I had been in editorial cartooning for quite a while, and frankly, I was kind of looking for a new, I don't know, a new challenge. I mean, I had been doing print. It was in newspapers. They were getting smaller because they were printing editorial cartoons smaller. And, I had this animation background. I thought, well, I'd like to see if I could not so much animate an editorial cartoon, but actually translate an editorial cartoon into an animated editorial cartoon. So, I developed these very simple, very short animated GIFs. I started out first with video, like a movie, but then I switched over to GIFs for a variety of reasons, but really to reach a larger audience. And so this, as you can see, is on a loop. Loops works really well with social media because people like to share them. And if you show the next one, it's another Trump one. And you just want a real simple point. He's really good at flinging mud all over the place. And that's pretty much what I've animated there. So I do these occasionally because of the fact that social media has become so important in the news business. I have a blog where I can either do these or I can do the traditional, still cartoon. I still do that. I can also do live sketching, which I've done, and maybe you could show that one. It's toward the end of my folder, where I'll actually watch something like a debate, or recently the impeachment proceedings in the Senate, and I'll just put out a bunch of paper. And this is how I ended up after 3 days of impeachment. Wow. I would just listen to the hearings. And hopefully, I mean, it didn't always work. I had to be on top of things. I had to be sufficiently caffeinated, and I had to know what I was drawing. You have to have a background. You have to know the issues, because as soon as you hear something, you have to translate it into an idea. So they're very loose. But this is what I do. I just sit there and I draw it, and then I throw it up on social media, and people seem to really respond to it because they're watching it too. And a lot of readers have gotten very involved with politics just because of social media and the fact that you can watch things real time. So yeah, I've been doing that. And then of course I have the option as well to write, which I do occasionally. Don't consider myself much of a writer, but if there's a topic, like, when the Charlie Hebdo murders happened, I wrote a couple of pieces about that. So, it's just a question now. And getting back to how things have changed, in my career, it's really, I think it's beneficial, especially now, for editorial cartoonists to be able to adapt. Use your talents, but don't get too stuck in one thing, just explore, I mean, that's the thing that's always got me going, is just to try something new and find the best medium for what you want to express in that idea. And sometimes it's animation, sometimes it's not. And I love having that freedom.
That versatility as well.
Yeah, that's well said. That's explore. I'm gonna, if I may, pick up on what she just.
Absolutely.
Because I was thinking about that when Anne was describing her, how she used her animation background to give her options to comment the way she wants to comment, and how she talks to students about just now, explore and find, and how style will come out of that. But style will only come out of that if they actually explore. As I'm sure I get disheartened when I see a portfolio of a young artist who's got all the talent in the world, and I have to do a double take because I'm thinking, wait a minute, is that is this Nico Marlet on a bad day? You go and see the orange halo pencil line with the magic marker figure inside, and like thinking, okay, Nico and others like Nico, the Carter Goodrich, de Sèvres, or the line, you know, in the world of character designs, you know, goes on. Look at them, copy them, learn from them, move on from that. Make it one of the ingredients in a larger stew. If you rest on one or two people, you know, you are really compromising your own truth, your own authentic voice. Anne earlier mentioned one of the great draftsmen, Jeff Mcnelly, who certainly launched many, many pens in the world of editorial cartooning. You look at early Mcnelly, and he was Pat Oliphant. And you look at early Pat Oliphant, and he was the great, unparalleled Ronald Searle. And in fact, Pat Oliphant actually told Richard Thompson, he said, an artist needs to stop looking at Ronald Searle, because he said at some point, because he says suddenly there's no better way to draw a pig or a lamppost or a car or the way someone walks. You know, it becomes definitive. So you must turn away from Ronald Searle, and, you know, keep stealing from many instead of just borrowing from one. You borrow from one, you will your style will be a second-rate version of that artist. You steal from many, and you will find your own voice eventually.
And like Nick was saying, you should look at stuff. And I encourage my students always, you know, take every single book and lay it out on your desk and just look and, you know, just drink it in. But when you're ready to draw, close those damn books.
Absolutely.
You know, and then draw, because then you'll remember things, but you won't be looking at them, trying to replicate them. Absolutely. God, we sound so old.
Yeah. and seasoned and experienced.
And provided me a segue to.
Great.
This is going to be a little out of order, but Matt, if you can follow, this should be pretty easy. So put things away. So Matt, if we could go to caricature a moment and mine. Okay, and you can, they're just a handful of them. I don't do a lot of caricature. I used to. So what Anne said about, you know, putting things away and then sitting down and drawing. This is what I learned, and the few times when I do caricature, this is what I learned worked for me. I would learn the head, in this case with Barbra Streisand. I would do portraits of her from whatever photographs I could find, and just learn it, learn the architecture of that head. You can scroll to let's see, it's a good one, is Bernie Sanders. You know, that's there you go. Yeah. And so I would learn, you know, and so in that, so for an hour or two or whatever it happens to be, all of that information, that his eyes are this far apart, that his expression does that, it's all in your head. And so now it's time to draw it. I put all of the reference away, and I sit down, and I know the person at this point. I know them from every angle. And so what comes out of my pencil at that point is guaranteed to be filtered through me. I'm not wedded to a single photograph. I'm not wedded to, you know, there are some brilliant, brilliant caricaturists out there who, frankly, I get a little frustrated by their work because they've basically distorted a single photograph. And they've distorted it beautifully, and it's wonderful. And I'm not, they are saying something of it, but it's so photo dependent. It's so single image dependent that it's not a work that stands on its own, in my opinion. So
and real quick, Nick, I just want to point out something, because you won't do it. Look at how you can tell that Nick has looked at him a lot, at Bernie Sanders a lot. He's not copying this, but he that little hand that he has there. That's Bernie's hand. If you've watched him in any of the various debates, what he does with his hand. I mean, the face is marvelous, but the hand for me is what does it. Yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
you really have pushed it beyond observation to innovation about, and that forces us, the viewer, to see he's there, absolutely, but we're seeing the statement you're making about him there.
Well, that's,
Powerful.
I appreciate, and Matt, you feel free, you can scroll through these as I talk about this. I'll make one more point with, like, even with the, and there's Trump and his little hand, and which I highlighted with a close-up. I don't know, this was just a study of this reptilian creature that I can't even look at my own drawing, which is why I never finished this thing. I just, I just even looking at it now. With this Beatles caricature, for example, it's fairly faithful to the cover. So of it's called Beatles for Sale. It's fairly faithful, but I did step away. I did draw them from different angles. I wanted to see, it's interesting. Ringo's nose has a bump from this angle. From that angle, it's actually fairly straight.
There we go.
And his nostril does this and that. So I learned their faces, and then I put the Beatles for Sale reference away and started thinking about shapes. And the shape of George came out. This is very strange. I don't even know what that shape is. But as long as it would read and especially felt like who they are. And that's what I was saying when Anne says, put the stuff away. What you're left with is what you know and what you feel, instead of what you're copying, what you're looking at.
Every line, every shape, every form, it's just all there. There's such another layer that goes beyond because of the entire approach. It's just remarkable. We've got a few questions coming up in the chat. Matt, let's move to those, and hopefully there may be some examples within all your work. I want to jog between the two of those, but let's move to the questions, Matt.
Yeah, I'll go to our first question here from Rueben, who's asking, does editorial cartooning lock you into doing art, only art in that space? If you make political opinions, can you still work in animation and other industries, etc.?
You mean, am I allowed to work elsewhere? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think he's asking, when you make political opinions, does that lock you out of certain working environments?
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, you do have to be careful. Yeah, I mean, like, I do have to, I get offered to do things sometimes, that's commercial, that, I really cannot accept it because, my name is kind of with the Washington Post, and I have to be aware of that. So no, I don't do certain things. So yes, it is something you have to keep in your mind, in the back of your mind. But it has a lot to do with the relationship you have with your paper. I mean, it depends. Especially if you're on staff, I think you're pretty restricted.
Do you feel that you're locked in and everything you produce has to have a statement, or can you just go out and create something?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to sign my name to it, my signature is recognizable too, so I do have to be aware of that. I mean, I do my own personal projects, but I have to be aware of that, sure.
Yeah. How about you, Nick?
No, I have a little bit more freedom. I mean, I couldn't do cartoons for, say, a direct competitor like the New York Times, because I too am with the Washington Post primarily, even though my work is syndicated. But where I found a nice outlet for a completely different approach, a completely different animal, scratches a different itch, to use the cliche, is in character design these last few years. And I actually thought with Blue Sky, the tragedy of Blue Sky Studios shutting down, and that's really tragic. It's not only are the projects not coming out, but some 400 plus people are suddenly out of work. and very geographically far away from the industry, which is obviously primarily located on the West Coast. So, but I thought with this shutting down of these projects that I would then be able to share some of the character designs that I did. And I probably will be in the future. I'm just not 100% sure yet, but I was going to do a little debut for you today, Mindy, but
Okay.
but I'm not, I can't because I'm not certain that these things are all dead in the water.
Stay on the
Um,
safer side of that then.
but character design allows me to explore a different part of a different artistic corner, a creative self, if you want to call it that. Matt, you can pop open character design and you can scroll as needed. These are all of the designs that I'm showing here are very, very old because they have to be, because the movies haven't been released yet on the ones that I have worked on. So I'm trying to, so this is, work that's fairly different than what a lot of my readers would associate me with. And I'm not commenting on relationships in the way that I do in the other stuff. They're captionless. And
You do a good shift, a good brain shift, a good balance.
they're totally, and not only as an outlet, but as I use different media. There's nothing better than pencil and tracing paper. And sometimes I'll do piece, in oil just to play around, or certainly watercolor. But gosh, pencil and paper is still, for me, a great love. So you get to explore that way. I actually try to stay away from, then this is a whole other can of worms, but digital. I use digital drawing tools all the time, but when I'm experimenting, I walk away from them. I stick it in the drawer because I find digital tools are great for when you've got something in mind and you're getting ready to put it down, and then you put it down and you're on deadline, which is its greatest asset. But that aside, it mitigates, the nature of the tool mitigates the authentic voice. I think it's a reality that artists use digital tools. Like that's done with the Lions, the Wizard of Oz thing. The reason I included this here is because sometimes I let character design leak into my regular syndicated gig. And in this case, the characters from the Wizard of Oz, at least as I see them, and that's all digital. But there was a lot of experimenting on a piece of paper with a pencil first before I went to digital. I think that young artists, learning how to draw should do the bulk of it with a pencil and paper, or a pen and paper, or paintbrush, or some analog device, something that doesn't become about itself, like a digital tablet, because that's so big, it's so powerful. It provides the cool effect for you, and then things become about that. And there's so much you don't learn. There's so much exploring you didn't do because it just did that thing for you, which is why, and just look out there, so many illustrators. And when I say illustrators, I mean editorial cartoonists, I mean character designers, I mean anybody who creates a graphic image. Why they look alike? They're using this tool.
Yeah.
It's like when like a particular kind of blue pigment came out 200 years ago, when paintings started looking like it because everybody had that one pigment. And so that's what this is what's happened. And so you need to learn away from this thing so that you can make it a tool instead of the thing.
That's great advice. Very great advice. Let's jump. There's a few more questions here, Matt. Let's jump to those.
Yeah, we have another question from Ruben here who's asking, can you speak about the different approaches to expressing opinion in this format? He goes on to say, I think it's interesting to comment on a social level.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
About expressing opinion. Well, let's take that and go towards your process. So if, and as you're watching a certain events unfold, how is your brain working? How are you processing this into, okay, where can I make the statement? What's going to have the largest impact or the biggest effect or speak the loudest?
I think most editorial cartoonists kind of work the same way. I mean, you're pretty much taking in all the news you possibly can. It's a constant thing. You're reading, you're gathering information. Gathering information is a very big deal. Whenever I have a young person tell me they want to be an editorial cartoonist, I say, well, you better really love it because you're going to be reading a lot of news. It's not just a question of drawing. Drawing is part of it, but you have to also be interested in the topics. And then, of course, there's always topics that you're going to gravitate towards. I mean, when I first started out, I was doing a lot of women's issues because obviously, I'm a woman. So, that interests me. It still interests me, but, I'd say in the last last third of my career, free speech is a big deal to me. So I do address that quite a bit. And, we've had some instances with the Charlie Hebdo killings, as well as the Danish cartoon controversy, where that's, been a big topic of discussion, not only in the cartooning land, but also writers and just the general population. So, I'll do that. But I mean, my day it's pretty boring. I get up early, I just read and absorb as much as I can. I carry a sketchbook, as all good cartoonists do. You carry that little sketchbook so you have ideas. I think more often than not, so I work in visual metaphors. Sometimes I'll just have a visual metaphor in my head and no topic to do it on, but that's rare. It's more I have my topic first, and then I have to figure out the best way to visually show my opinion on that topic. And sometimes it comes fast, you know what I mean? Sometimes it comes quickly to me. But the actual thinking up the idea is the longest. If you take in the time of all the research you do, drawing it is not really a big deal. I mean, comparatively to the rest of the time you spend, it really is an ongoing process. I mean, I love taking, pardon me?
I would think there's a lot of discovery in that process, right? About posture, position, framing, as you're.
Well, yeah. I mean, going back to what Nick was talking about, body language, you have to choose. You're going to choose body language. You're going to choose where your eye is going. It's going to tell you all about the characters, the body language. You're not going to do someone who's confident is slouching over. You're going to have them standing up tall. You take all these things into consideration. The more you do it, it becomes sort of natural and you're not really thinking you're doing it. But yes, you do have to take into consideration what is the message you're trying to put across and what's the best way of doing that in the shortest amount of time. Because when people are looking on a newspaper page or online, you only have a certain amount of time to get their attention.
Right.
I mean, if you don't grab them with that image in 4 seconds, they're gone. So one of the reasons my gifs are so short too, because I don't want people to have to sit, people's attention spans are about this short, so, I want to have my first goal is to make sure I know what I want to talk about, what my position is on it. I can't be either or. That's not what editorial cartoonists do. We don't do, on the other hand, we have an opinion. It's our opinion. And then how can I successfully draw that to get my reader to understand? It doesn't always happen the way I want it to, but that's the goal.
And Rueben, if you're out there still asking what the good cartoonists, what the good editorial cartoonists, and I would say cartoonists in general, I try to do this in my work, I try, but like Anne will do, is they don't only express an opinion on a subject, but that opinion nudges the conversation forward.
Right.
Whatever direct, there's a lot of cartoonists out there that simply literally illustrate what happened.
And that's
And
not an editorial cartoon.
not
That's an
an
illustrative. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That is not, you're taking the information and you're going somewhere with it. Anne does that very well. Other Mike Lukovich, there are some good cartoonists out there that are very, very good at doing that. And to bring it back to, I keep thinking, a lot of what we're talking about here without using the words is the form follows function, form follows function. Everything serves your idea. Everything, which is so, it sounds easy and it's so hard to do. Matt, if we could hit my process folder for a second, I'm going to take you on a little journey here. So Anne earlier was talking about how she came together her style so honestly, her love of animation and her background in animation as far as I had never had art lessons. I never went to art school. So I came about it through the two great motivators, fear and ignorance. And so my hatching style, and right now showing you a very early example, two women talking, go figure. I always felt good about my concept because I knew what I wanted to say. I knew what I wanted to say, and this is very, very typical of something I want to say. It's, again, somebody who lacks self-awareness. I won't describe the cartoon because hopefully it speaks for itself. It's on your screen. But what you'll see there is the intense hatching. Okay, my drawing skills were not great, and there's a lot of hatching, and the hatching came out of fear. What I didn't know about myself is that I liked volume. I liked form, I liked volume, I liked movement, even if you're sitting there. And so the fearful way for me to arrive at that was to just keep little marks of hatching and turn the figure. These are not the bold, confident hatch marks of someone like Mcnelly or Oliphant, or to go back further, Gustave Doré or Frank Frazetta or Heinrich Clay, or, where there's those energy filled, that stuff that it all works. Now this was raw fear. I didn't know what I was doing. And so that's how I started. And then you can go to the next one. That started to refine as I simply became a better draftsman, and my forms got better at showing gravity and weight and movement and attitude, all things that I wanted to get good at because I thought that they spoke to the point I was trying to make. That is important. You never lose sight of that. Everything, when I say everything feeds the point you're trying to make, whether there's a caption or not. And so, but you'll see in this one still, there's a lot of hatching because I still love volume, and I'm too afraid to arrive at it any other way. It's, you can move to the next one. Same with this one. Really super intricate. God, and Anne was talking about having to do this stuff on deadline, and yeah, that is, at some point you want to shoot yourself in the face. You're looking at the clock and you have half of this undone, and you've started, so you can't go back. You can't do, but again, this is a strange combination when I look at it now of confidence in that I'm starting to develop a line and an attitude, but the fear is still there. And I started to analyze why? Well, Nick, you love volume. You love volume. I also love my dog. You can move to the next one. I tried to do it with less hatching. I tried to just hint at things and let the forms hold. But having been totally uneducated, I really didn't understand things about values. And boy, values, silhouettes, something that's dark and light and moves in the foreground and background and the shadow. All of that stuff has become important to me later in my career and hopefully helped me. Here, I didn't know, I was just doing what made sense to my eye. But even when I went spare, it was unsatisfying because the volume was missing. So I leapt to another stage. All of this is coming out of my trying to figure out who I am. You can move to the next one, Matt, and this should be the therapist. I, for a while there, I just went straight black and white. Very little, if any, hatching, and big black blocks. I started to look at older cartoonists who really had a mastery of just the big black area. And I still study them because they've unlocked something for me. They sort of create the illusion of volume without, turning the form like that. This kind of approach I was thrilled with some of this discovery because it gave I knew that the reader could fill in the blank of like her sleeve. She's holding that pen. I don't need to show the folds in the inside of her elbow. Your brain will do that. And I was so excited by that possibility, but it still wasn't satisfying. And so you can move to the next one. And so I started to use watercolor to fill that role. I went back to form, turning it. This time, watercolor, of course, covers a lot of area very quickly, whereas hatching, it can take most of the week to do 1 inch, in the way I was doing it. And so this supplied me with my love of form and volume, and hopefully didn't get too much in the way of what I was trying to say, like I mentioned earlier, the illustration becoming about itself. So these next few, which you can scroll through, Matt, at your convenience, are all pen and ink and watercolor, trying to find that balance of form, attitude, atmospheric quality, and all of them serving the point that I'm trying to make. And by serving, I mean serving, underlying serving, and not crushing it. This, in the St. Peter one here, it has to feel heavenly. But if you don't jump right to that woman's face and to St. Peter's, patiently listening as she tells him off, then you've missed the whole thing. The rays behind it, the clouds, all this, that's all there to support that kind of thing. So this has been a journey of, and then the last one is the hamsters, of what this is also typical, again, of serving the point. I like the idea that the reader has to supply the hamster's expressions. It's just, to me, it's funnier that way, but it's also more interactive that way. You're standing with them, something I got from like looking at Norman Rockwell. If you look at a Norman Rockwell, so many Norman Rockwell paintings, like the famous one at Thanksgiving, you're looking at it, you're the next person in that picture. Everything's coming closer to you. They're looking around. You're next. You're right outside of that frame, but you're next at the table. And often I'll try to do something like that, where I bring you in this way. So you're standing right behind these guys. You're imagining what their expressions are, because you've done this. You've lived through your version of what they're dealing with right now. That point that I'm rambling on about is the important thing. Everything else, the watercolor, the spare background with just the wheel, it has to serve all of that. So my style change is evolving, because I'm trying to find that balance. I'm trying to find that organic marriage.
I think that's a really great point you bring up, especially in the last frame, about this conscious awareness of your audience and ensuring that they are either along for the ride or relatable to what's happening, or clearly getting the message. Do you find that that can be challenging at times, or is that a second nature thing now that you've been doing this enough, that you are thinking of your audience in everything you do?
Well, I don't want to dominate. If Anne was about to answer that, I can.
Right.
I can speak. I can speak to that. Okay, yeah, you can cut this however you want. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. So you bring up something interesting, Mindy. I am aware that, but I also try to remove the audience, the reader. I'll call them that. I try to remove them from the creative calculus. I bring them in. Kind of at the end-ish, towards the end. Obviously, I don't want to do something that's obscene. That, then you're considering others. But it's important to me that, just like what I was talking about, you look at the reference and you put it away, and then the images that you're left with are what you're going to put down on paper. It's guaranteed to be interpreted through you. In this same way, I have something I want to comment on, and if I sit down and say, okay, what is Mindy going to find interesting and funny? I'll come up with something that's akin to sitcom television.
Right.
But if I'm trying to entertain myself, if I'm just an audience of one at my board, I guarantee an honest response to this issue. And then you start massaging it through my sensibilities, as far as artistic sensibility, style, the humor, whatever it happens, what I find funny or what I find provocative. And again, I'm truly trying to entertain myself. And then at that point is when, like, a really great editor is helpful to help you see what you don't see, what you might be too self-absorbed in that moment to see. But the early part of the process it's important that I'm trying to just entertain myself and comment on something I care about.
Yeah. Is that true for you, Anne, or do you?
Well, it's just just because we're in different, different parts of the paper, it is a little different. I mean, in terms of editors, sure, editorial cartoonists have editors to varying degrees. I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I've been freelance my entire editorial cartooning career. So I've never really had people, that have really looked at my work and told me no. Now, I've been with the Post since 2008. I do have editors, and I have been, I have had things killed more recently than before. And I think that has to do with just the tenor of the country. People's emotions are running very, very high. That's something I think that editorial cartoonists have had to really deal with and social media brought it on, we talked before, you have to be aware of what you're trying to say in your cartoon. So you're choosing visual metaphors, you're choosing what to use. And in this day and age with social media and how fast it can go around, and people frankly will distort your message by, saying it's one thing when it's not. We've had to deal with that minefield now. And while social media is great for reaching all across the world, that's another minefield that we have to step into, because, certain visuals mean certain things to different countries, different cultures. So it is more difficult. The trick is not to let it self-censor you. We do have to be aware, and I am aware, and sometimes you get in trouble. I've gotten in trouble before, about what I've done in cartoons. So you have to deal with that. It's difficult. And I think editors are also finally coming to grips with it too, what social media can do to an editorial cartoon and how quickly it can really change what the editorial cartoonist was trying to say. So it's a little more dicey now than it was before. It is.
Sign of the changing times, that's for sure. Matt,
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get to our questions that have come in. Let's move to the next one.
Yeah, I really want to hit this question from Kathy, who mentions that they really want to be an editorial cartoonist. but is wondering what steps should they take to have their work featured in publications?
Okay, and this is from a woman?
Yes.
If I'm going for the name, I think so.
Excellent. I'm really glad to hear that because we need more women. We need more minorities in this. We're still basically a bunch of white males that are in editorial cartooning in the United States. So it's a little different now. I mean, before, yes, you had to go try to find a newspaper that would print you, but we have the magic of the internet. There's nothing stopping you from posting your own work. It's the best way to be seen. So that's the first thing I would suggest. You have social media accounts, put your work up so people can see it. What I did before I joined the Post and I was still freelance, I went online and I looked for news sites that didn't have an editorial cartoonist or weren't showing them. And I found this one about, I don't know if it's still in existence, Women's E-News, that was all about women's stories, not fashion, not hair, but news stories about women's issues. And I looked through the site and I thought, they don't have an editorial cartoonist. So I emailed the editor and I said, you need one. And she said, oh, yes, I do. So, it's initiative. It's the same thing as basically pounding the pavement with your portfolio is, look and see where your work would fit. But you do have the extra, what we didn't have before the internet is you have the internet, use it, show your stuff and use it as a place that you can constantly work. And if you want to be an editorial cartoonist, give yourself, a schedule. Say you got to do one once a day, even if it's bad. I can't tell you how many bad ones I've done, but just get into the habit. Oh, I'm sorry, Nick.
No, I was just making a smart remark, Anne. Please go ahead.
Oh, gee, what a surprise.
Brilliant.
You made a smart remark. What I was going to say, and I'll finish here, is just work really hard at it because editorial cartooning, even though good drawing is a great asset, and those are the ones that are going to be noticed, you have to have the idea every day, which means you have to be informed. So you got to do your homework and you got to do it every day. And if you can't do it every day and you're not enjoying it, it's not for you. I mean, as I said, I've been in this a long time. I still get up in the morning and I'm still excited about doing it. And when I'm not, I'll stop.
That's great advice.
I'd say, Kathy, also know how you feel about something, because that was what I've said several times now. That'll guarantee that what you create is honest and it'll be yours. And as much as anything on the internet, which, and Anne's right, get it out there, you have this big tool. But how do you cut through the internet? There's a trillion, I think Pascal Campion told me a couple of years ago, it was just a frightening thought. He said, and he said it in his beautiful French accent, but he says, do you realize that in the last 3 years, more images have been made than in all of human history leading up to the last 3 years? When you think about that, so it's intimidating. So the way to cut through all of this is through an authentic voice, because authenticity it's rare. It surprises us, especially today, because today is about popularity, whatever it takes to do that, to get noticed. It's about self-promotion. It's about all of these things, necessary maybe in some fashion or some fraction of this thing, but an authentic voice is shocking because it's true. And truth is always, like I said, it surprises us. You may not develop a massive following. You may, but you may not make, but an authentic voice almost always will develop a devoted following, whoever it is, however many it is. And so know how you feel about that thing and don't be afraid to express it. And use media to reinforce that point. Don't look around and see what the other person is doing and say, oh, that works, I'm going to do that. That's fine for learning, but don't plant your flag there. Plant your flag in the middle of your own chest.
Okay, great points. I want to get to our questions, but Matt, I also want to show a little bit more of Anne's work as well. because there's some really strong examples of her style in there. So if you could magically juggle that. um,
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just go through these as we ask our
yeah.
next question. Our next question is from Pamela, who's asking both of you, do you ever do illustrations of picture books?
You both have.
I think Nick, you've done a children's book, right?
Well, the one, the one. So, well, two-part answer to that. As I too am admiring these just beautiful images of ants right here. That line is so strong. By the way, for those listening, this is what I've told Anne many, many times in private. She doesn't have a bigger fan of this confident, elegant line, and I just love a good draftsman in whatever form. And boy, does this just qualify as nice stuff. Just, it's evocative, and that she can make it move so that it pisses you off, that it gives you a rallying cry, that it punches you in the gut. That if you think about it, that's not an easy trick. I've thought about it a lot because I keep using the word elegant when I describe Anne's line, but elegant, it's elegant, and yet she's getting in the dirt. She's down and dirty, and she's fighting for a good cause. And reconciling those two things, balancing those two things is not easy. You think about it, it's not an easy thing to do. So children's book, yeah, I'm actually got 3 of them that I'm working on now. And for me, what's exciting about that is that I'm writing them. It's like I do my cartoons. I'm writing 3 of these books, and hopefully I have something to say in that regard. And they'll be illustrated differently, each one, because they'll follow the point of the story. The book that you have up is a children's book. Yes, I actually didn't know it was coming out until it came out. What that is a friend of mine, daughter, at the time her daughter was 7. She had a terrible accident. The little girl broke her arm. And the complications were horrifying, and she was in the hospital for a very, very long time and under a tremendous amount of pain. There's no way, I'm only explaining this because that book is up there. Otherwise I don't want to make myself sound like something I'm not. But I went and visited her nightly at the hospital, and just to distract her from her pain, I would do any kind of drawing, anything, scribble, the left-handed. I would start doodles and let her finish them. I would ask her, what do you want to see right now? And I would draw it without any thought or anything. So this is work that was truly for, you say, one audience, that she was the audience. No one was ever supposed to see these things, ever, ever. And her mom, who has some pull, gathered up all of the drawings and wrote a story along with her daughter, and wrote a story
in that.
and put it out there. And it's sweet from that standpoint. But the artist in me is horrified because I wouldn't have done a single one of those drawings that way, or even done those drawings. So that's a long-winded answer to yes. I have 3 children's books that I am working on, and I look forward to their coming.
And Anne, you've done several books as well. Any other projects along those lines in the works?
I've done 3 books, but no children's books. No, to be honest with you, it's been so busy politics-wise that I've done a personal project, which I'm hoping that I can develop into something else. But I thought there would be a normal transition in office where I thought I'd get a break, and I didn't. So now, hopefully I'll have a little time.
Well, it gives us something to be looking forward to.
Yeah, I hope.
I want to make sure we get to, I know we're running a wee bit over, but we've got such great questions coming up. I want to make sure we get them met. Matt?
Yeah, next question is here from Christopher. But before I get to his question, he also wanted to add that Nixon had her block, Reagan had Conrad, and Trump had you, Anne.
Well, that's high praise. Thank you very much.
His question is, do you think that the GIF or animated editorial cartoon will become more prevalent in the future? Do you feel like animation has added to the power of idea to images?
Well, I think so. I think for editorial cartoons, I think sometimes the idea requires animation. I think that the issue is, at least in my, my generation of editorial cartoonists, a lot of them, most of them didn't have animation background. I was lucky. I had animation background. I don't think I could have done them as easily if I didn't. I was a little rusty when I started, but it kind of comes back. So I had that to start with. The ones that tried to do animation, just cold, you had to learn first animation. But now, like my class, for instance, these were all animators. A couple of them tried animated editorial cartoons. I think they were more intrigued with doing multi-panel because I think they're all raised on graphic novels. So they tended to like the multi-panel format for an editorial cartoon. But that was one of the reasons I wanted to teach the class, is because I do think that animation students, some of them maybe would like to really have a voice, a political voice through their animation. And I think that if you have that fire in your belly, like Nick was talking about, and you have an animation background, I think you could really, really create your own career. Because, the editors are looking for new things. It's the only reason I got a chance to do it at the Post. The timing was there. It was, they had just started their website in 2006 or something like that. The timing was there. They had just switched editors who was looking for something new. And by Nick's good friend, Richard Thompson, who knew it, he gave me the email address of this guy. And that's how I started. So, it's all about being ready, and it's all about timing, and it's all about innovating. So just get out there. It's a great, see, in my profession, there is a certain amount of dread because, newspapers have died off, our traditional home is gone. But I think it's kind of exciting with the internet because we're definitely in the beginning stages of it. But it's really what you make of it. You've got to get out there and hustle. So I'm hoping that the younger generation will do that.
They're a generation who's grown up on that format, so they're maybe a little more familiar and can see where it can go. Matt, let's keep going. I see couple more questions, and then we'll begin to wind this down.
So this next question from George, and I think you guys talked about this a little bit in your observations, but George is wondering, when you're drawing, do you have pictures of objects or people in front of you, or do you absorb images and work from memory?
It depends on what you're doing, but both. I mean, you've drawn enough, you've drawn for decades, and you've sort of acquired a big filing cabinet in your head of images. And so that on the other hand, you should always look at things, and if you're copying them only because if you're doing something photorealistic, but otherwise learn its anatomy and then put it away, like I said, and then you throw it down. This is interesting. One of my favorite thoughts came from the painter Renoir, and I should say, I do not like Renoir's paintings. I don't like them. They just don't appeal to me. I appreciate them. I appreciate his place in history. It's just his stuff, the cotton candy stuff doesn't really appeal to me, but he said something that I've taken to heart. So, I realized this guy was a great thinker as well as a great painter. His son, who you may know was a great filmmaker in the late 20s and 30s. And he saw his old father out on their estate painting out in the yard in the sun, this old man, and he's looking at trees and he's doing a landscape. And his cocky know-it-all sort of son, who went on to become one of the greatest filmmakers ever, Jean Renoir, he asked his dad, how many trees have you painted in your life? Haven't you memorized the thing? I mean, you've painted these trees and different ones at every time of day, at every time of year. What are you doing out here? Get inside and do it there. And his dad said, it's true. I've painted thousands and thousands of trees at every time of day and every time of year in all light and all weathers. And I could go inside and I could paint a very convincing tree. But eventually I would repeat myself. And that's the day that I die as an artist. Always look at nature. And by nature, he didn't mean natural things like trees. He meant the things that the questionnaire just asked about, all of those things. Look at them, learn them, make them your own. Keep looking, keep feeding your mind, keep looking, keep growing your visual library, and all of that stuff will grow. And you won't die as an artist.
That's great advice. And for you, any good?
Oh, I don't think I can
advice?
improve on that one. No.
Well, I want to thank you both for your time and your talents today. One last final question. In all the observations each of you have made and in all the statements that you have made through your work, what's been the most meaningful for you individually?
Wow.
Question.
Explain the universe in 3 sentences.
What's been the most meaningful piece of work I've done? Oh
Yeah,
my God.
what stands out for you that either personally or professionally that perhaps is the most quintessential piece of work for you?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't really look at my work that way. I think there's certain pieces that I think are more powerful than others. I mean, I don't mean for this to sound as romanticized as it's going to sound, but I really do look forward to the next piece. I mean, I really do. I'm actually at the point of my life now where, I'm sitting there going, I only have a certain amount of time left and I haven't even done half the damn things I want to do.
What more
So I don't,
saying? Thank goodness.
I just don't. I'm excited about, like I mentioned before, a personal project, but I have to see where that goes. I don't know, maybe.
Is that the key to being a good social commentary artist, to be continually looking ahead?
I think that's the key for any artist, frankly. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think that to me, an artist that's constantly searching and discovering and learning, that's being an artist to me. There's always something exciting. I mean, I think of as an example, Steve Brodner, who's this amazing illustrator, animator. I mean, he does everything. He's always searching, and then he's been doing this forever. He's excited. He gets up in the morning excited. That's what I feel being an artist is.
I've had and this probably reflects the nature of my course, my subject matter, but I know how this makes me feel because I've had occasion pre-pandemic to run into these people. But every once in a while, I'll hear from someone, certainly, in by email and stuff like that, or I'll actually meet someone. You walk into somebody's house and you see a cartoon of yours on the refrigerator, and I'll say, "Geez, that's my." And then you hear, "Oh, they'll say that gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband," or another one, so I didn't realize that I was somebody who always needed to blame somebody, who always, or I didn't realize that giving somebody the silent treatment is actually a very abusive thing. I am somebody who takes things personally instead of looking at them objectively. This kind of thing is when on the rare occasion when you meet somebody that had some sort of positive impact on them because of a cartoon, that just makes you want to fly. Because you don't know that you're sending it out into the world and then you caught some of the ripple effect. And that is really, at least for me, not why I do it exactly, but it is a beautiful feeling when I cross paths with it.
We as audiences are grateful for the impact of the work you do and the voices you show us each and every day with your work. So we are grateful. Thank you for taking the time today and joining us here on Primary Sources and TALNEAS and Nick Galifinakis. Thank you so much for sharing your talent. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.